And welcome to another of our weekly happiness question and answer live streams, where we are always excited about trying to solve real life problems, personal and global, using spiritual teachings. You can check out all our previous shows at bigquestionsanswer.com. Hopefully you can, this pretty other finger, there it is somewhere. Can you see by my finger? There's bigquestionsanswer.com. Okay, you can check out all the previous shows there and even future ones. I'm Khalid, or Khalid, if you can do that. You got it, there you go. If you could do that as well. I follow Islam, which itself is connected to all other religions of the world. My friend here, I'm trying to get my finger the right way around, Len follows existentialism as well as other spiritual practices. I don't necessarily agree with Len on a lot of things, which is why I invited him to join me. I think it's good to have different opinions and maybe even learn from each other. I want you to take part, argue, disagree, maybe even agree with us in the chat. To help you do that, Len and I will start by giving short answers to each topic to give you an idea of what our opinions are. And if you have any comments after that, then we will take them into account. I think the time has run out. Let's get going. I'm going to paste the question. Copy. Here we go. I'm going to go first because I always mess up a few things and I'll use up my own time. So anyway, do we all self-harm through our addiction? So I've come across some very interesting definitions of addiction this week. So this is what prompted me to ask this question. And it's this idea that addictions are these short-term, benefits that we get, and we, in the long term, it harms us. So basically, we're harming ourselves and consistently. And why would we do such things? And you might think you don't have an addiction, but sugar is an addiction. You could be addicted to power. You could be addicted to work. So there's all these addictions that harm us in the long term, but make us happy in the short term. So that's my idea behind addiction. And I would say that addiction is a necessary outcome of what you could describe broadly as materialistic lifestyle. So how is that? There's a verse of the Quran I'll often quote from different faiths, but I'll most often quote from Islam, and it says, what have I got? And as to those who disbelieve, their deeds are like a mirage in a desert. The thirsty one thinks it to be water until when he comes up to it, he finds it to be nothing, and he finds God near him who then fully pays him his account. What does that even mean? Basically, it's giving the idea of what materialism is like. You are like chasing a mirage, and a mirage is always something in the distance, but when you finally arrive there, you finally get the iPhone, it doesn't make you as happy as you thought. It's a mirage, it's an illusion. And so you're never happy and you're constantly thirsty for more and chasing it. So materialism causes an addiction, a never-ending cycle for more and more, because it never is satiating, and so that's painful. But also, this chasing of things keeps you away from true happiness, that's spirituality, and so it is going to harm you. All these things that go in a different direction to happiness or spirituality do harm you. So there's another verse of the Quran that goes something like, whosoever follows the guidance follows it for the good of their own soul, and whoever errs only against it. So basically, you do something towards spirituality, it makes you happy. Your soul is your true essence. That's where all happiness resides. Everything that's important resides there. So that's my short answer. If you agree, disagree, please chat. And Len's going to have a go at the same question. Go for it, Len, please.
Self-harm, yes. I actually had a friend who passed away as a result of drug overdose back in 2001. And the reason that happens, we are addicted, we form addictions, and bad habits are because we are unhappy, or people are inherently unhappy. And when people are inherently unhappy, they look for something else out there to satisfy whatever emotional need they cannot fulfill within themselves. From a hypnotherapy point of view, we try to help them and guide them through a root cause, finding the root cause often, if it's this life, where the memories are from, or where the things started, or whether it's a past life, which is also a possibility. We find that through the subconscious, we can ask the questions, and we can take the people back and ask them to bring forth a lifetime where this thing is rooted in, this unhappiness is rooted in, and try and find what is going on there. And we usually ask the subconscious to explain to us why this habit formed in this lifetime and what can be done to resolve it. What guidance does the subconscious give the person? And we have a conversation in that way, which is really great. But we do find that it is a habit that is formed with very negative and damaging outcomes as a result of unhappiness. Now, I agree wholeheartedly there with Khalid, where we say an unhappy thing in your own life can never be fulfilled with a something that you are chasing externally. To find true happiness, you have to align yourself with source. Source is your soul. Your soul is a fragment of God within you. And when you are able to center yourself, take yourself into a quiet space and become aware of source within you, and you become connected to source within you, you can find fulfillment there. That we have breathing techniques, we have mantras, we have exercises you can do that are fairly simple and highly effective in order to help people with such a connection. So it's very important that you cannot use things, material things and habits to cover the emotion or take that pain away, the reason or the cause for the unhappiness. It is important to understand that that can be resolved through healthier habits, through something that helps you to take away that thing, to address the issue. Never find it's not about shying away or making the pain go away, but addressing it, finding what it is there for, and letting it go, releasing it. That's the key to it, is addressing it and releasing it. This is where we deal with habit-forming addictions and things in people's lives.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I've got a question from Anwar Ahmed. And so I know the format's a bit different, Anwar. So what's happening is we're actually sticking to a certain number of questions, and they are in the description below. So if you click there, but I'm going to try to fit your question about, politicians being more tolerant or maybe being nicer, I don't know, into another question. Do we need religion to be good? I might try to squeeze it in somehow into that one. So sorry, Anwar, I know you're a regular, I really appreciate it. See if you can look in the comments below and see if you can try to answer a question according to those categories. Just trying a new format today. Anyway, so back still on, do we all self-harm through our addictions? It's very rare that we don't. There's always going to be something to work on. And so an addiction, I've got many addictions. I'm always like watching too many movies or whatever it is, too much YouTube, all these kind of things. Why do I do that? Am I overstepping the balance? And that's what really matters. Islam and many other religions have this idea of keeping the balance. So too much of something is always bad for you. Too little, also can be bad itself. So we are effectively harming ourselves in small ways, but it's good to look at those small things. So a beautiful way that a religious people, especially in Islam, look at their lives is they're always looking at themselves under the microscope. There's this beautiful word, it's also the name of my daughter, called taqwa. Taqwa means pretending you have this very thin clothing that you're going through a forest with, and that thin clothing can easily be caught on a thorny bush. Thorny bushes are effectively mean things like sin, and you have to be really careful not to tear this thing called taqwa, this your righteousness. And so the idea behind this way of looking at life under the microscope, your own morals reflecting constantly, is that when you do this, you actually make your life really easy. You stop way beyond the big problem. So if you fix a small problem like, your friendliness towards your neighbors and your family and things like that, then you don't go bigger problems like alcoholism. So what's alcoholism got to do with your relationships? I find that, especially in this country, people are really bad at communicating, and they take alcohol as a kind of a clutch for their inability to relax and socialize with each other. So if you're good at socializing, if you work on these details all the time, you don't fall prey for the bigger addictions, the bigger problems that hurt you badly. Cool.
I can only reflect on my own life as far as addictions are concerned, but this is pretty much where I feel that by doing regular introspection, looking at oneself, is very important in something like dealing with addictions. It is very important for us to realize that we are social beings. We experience reality through the outer world that we're trying to absorb and learn from and evolve from. As souls, we are on this evolutionary path. But we also need to go within, and going within is a crucial part of our evolutionary process as well, because then we can get a sense of the self, who we are. We define ourselves from going within. Somebody once gave us an exercise to do, which I felt was a very good exercise that I recommend everybody do. And that is, tell me who you are without telling me your name, your family status, and what you do. And you can use I am statements in order to do this. I am kind. I am generous. I am a peace-loving. I am social. I am engaging. I am. Write down all this stuff about who you are, because that's how you create and identify the sense of self within you. And that was a very helpful experience. Now, why I'm saying that is because we tend to look at external things to identify ourselves. And very often we get trapped in materialism by doing so. I am not my iPad and my Porsche car that I'm driving and my $20 million pound mansion that I'm living in. Those are not the things that define you, but we get trapped in all those things. And this is where we fall off the bandwagon. And it's very important for us to come back to the sense of who we are, as I described earlier, by going within, doing self-reflection, because that's where you get steered away from habit-forming addictions that become damaging to who you are and your sense of self. And usually the damage is done in this way, when you not only damage yourself, but it also harms your loved ones, those who care about you, friends and family. So it's important to understand that that balance, going within, identifying yourself, being fully aware of who you are, is part of the staying on the right track, staying on the straight and the narrow, to be honest with you, and staying healthy in your views and your outlooks. Because if you respect yourself, you'll respect your other. You'll respect your friends and family in that way.
Cool. I like a lot of what you're saying there. Okay, so this is the next question. You can see it even though it's red at the moment. Science. This is a quote from Ricky Gervais. It says, "Science is humble." He's a comedian, atheist comedian, by the way. "Science is humble. It knows what it knows, and it knows what it doesn't know." And it was implying basically religion doesn't. I should say doesn't, not isn't. That's a mistake. We must fix that. But anyway, the reason why I'm coming up with this question is because I make videos, daily videos on TikTok, and I've got what sounds maybe like an atheist who disagrees with the views I put, and is not disagreeing specifically to anything I'm saying. He just doesn't like how confident I am. So how can you possibly be confident about so many things? And I think that's a fair enough comment. I actually really encourage people to disagree with me and tell me how they think I'm wrong. It's many ways. That's how people can express what they truly feel sometimes. Okay, because people are really stuck in their ability to communicate. So that might be the way he needs to do it. And so there are a lot of things hidden inside that comment, like how can you possibly know things? And science is more humble that, you know, it doesn't claim to know things, and religious people claim to know everything, as it were. That's kind of hidden behind this kind of question. And I would like to start off with the fact that science and religion are not actually that different, but you might think it's different because of your experience of religion. So your experience of religion really probably could have been Christianity, which Christianity actively tells you to believe in the opposite of every truth we know in the scientific world. Like, you know, the world was created in 6 days, and the order in which things were made is completely different to what we believe in real science. But on the other hand, Islam actually brought science, medicine, mathematics to Europe and basically to the world when it was in the Dark Ages. Literally, it was in the Dark Ages, and Islam brought all these things to the world. It even brought old lost knowledge like the Greek knowledge of Pythagoras and things like that. It was totally lost, and Islam brought that. Islam even brought paper from China, which comes to brings you back to this quote that Islam teaches go all the way to China to learn if you have to. Okay, and in those days you have to walk. It was a long way. The point is that, first of all, they're not two different things, and the second thing is there's a lot of evidence that God exists. Now, if God does exist, then it makes sense that we can find out a lot of things from God, who's our creator. You know, he knows a lot more than we do. So anything our tiny, puny brains can handle, God knows a lot more than that. And you shouldn't be surprised that we can get a lot of answers to so many questions that we don't know yet. Cool.
Yes. To understand fully about science, I'm fully aware with science. I come from a scientific kind of background as well in computer knowledges and so on. But it's important to understand that, yes, science can take you this so far and no further. I do believe that we evolve on different levels. We are multidimensional beings, and we need to understand that there's the aspect of the instinct when we reason things through, fight and flight response, when we procreate, when we make sure that everything on the table is ready for us to eat, you know, your food, your drive that keeps you going. But then the next level up is the logic and the reason part of who we are. We use logic and reason, and science pretty much falls within this world as well. The everything that we understand in the natural world, the laws of gravity, the laws of motion, important aspects about the scientific community that they come up with. But then there's a next level up, which is the soul level, the intuitive level. Now that takes you to a new level, and that's a level that we haven't fully explored yet, which is new for us. We are scratching the surface, and it's very metaphysical. I'm going to throw this word at you: metaphysical. Metaphysical is about the spirituality sciences, the science of spirituality, because a lot of religion that I am aware of talks about following the faith, whether it be Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and so on. But to see the evidence, the outcomes of those things in motion is a very different thing. You can explore, there's a YouTube clip called the double split experiment, which is a quantum mechanics experiment, where the light particles are bombarded through two metal splits. or two splits in a metal sheet, and then they look at the sheet behind to see where these particles land. And there's an interesting phenomena that happens when you do this. And this is that while they're trying to understand when no one is looking, when they're not observing, the particles that land on the other side of the sheet are scattered everywhere. But when you put a camera in to observe what's going on with these particles, then suddenly two lines appear. The particles form in two lines on the back sheet. The only difference there's an observer. But take the observer away and the particles are scattered through the sheet. Now, this is a very interesting thing, because this particular experiment proves one thing, that by observing, we are creating reality. That's metaphysical. By observing on a quantum level, we collectively are creating the world we are living as a holographic projection. Now, that's metaphysical. So that takes you to a next level of understanding of sciences. And this is where our work comes into play with the soul. And that's really important to understand.
Cool. All right. Thank you. So continuing with this question, and again, I just want to remind people, try to ask questions based on what you see, here, or if you want, check below in the description and you'll see the questions that are coming up. So as I was saying in the first 3 minutes, science and religion are not at all far apart. Well, if you got true religion, the true original teachings, they are not going to be far apart. But as in Christianity and some other religions, where it's quite well known that man's handiwork, as it was, got mixed up the Bible, and there are things that there was nothing to do with the original teaching. So no wonder there's all sorts of confusion or things that contradict science. But in the Quran, it's been shown that the original teachings have not changed for how many centuries since the beginning, since it was written. So that's pretty amazing by itself. But so first of all, there's that. Then I also mentioned that Islam actually brought science to Europe and effectively the whole world, and even went to places as far as China to learn the secrets of making paper, which it was pretty hard to get from the Chinese because it was a closely guarded secret. But of course, once the Muslims had learned that, they told everybody in the world how to do it, and the world changed forever. Anyway, so that's just a little bit of background. But I also mentioned that it makes sense to believe in God, and the Quran isn't very, it doesn't force people to believe in things. I think that's kind of, sometimes there's a feeling behind these questions that these religious people are trying to push an agenda, they're trying to shove religion down our throats. And let me just read a verse of the Quran and you can decide yourself. So it says, and in the alternation of the night and day and the provision that Allah, that is God, and Allah, by the way, is a common name that's in different religions, slightly different. Eli, Elo, I can't remember different names in Hebrew. But it's a very common name in different religions. So, and in the alternation and the night and day and the provision that Allah, that is God, sends down from the heavens, that is the skies, whereby he quickens the earth, that means he waters it, and after its death, so it brings it back to life. And in the changing of the winds and the sign, there are signs for people who try to understand. So it's just encouraging you to look at the world and go, is there any sign that God exists? Now, why are the alternation of the night and day? So if you don't reflect, you won't be amazed by how all these details, like the earth tilting on an axis, not being exactly in line, facing the sun all the time. Wow, did the time fly by that quick?
3 minutes gone, yes. Really?
There's a lot of evidence. Reflect on that one.
Yes. I think as part of the nature of life that we are living in is to understand the cycles of life. And the cycles are important as part of our growth, our development, because all these things happen in cycles. They are beginning. Full moons are endings. New moons are beginnings. And you will find that a moon cycle is an indication of a cycle in which you can plan your life, structure your life. In the olden days, especially for harvesting and farming, it was very important to follow moon cycles to determine the cycles of the moon throughout the year. When is it time to sow? When is it time to harvest? When is it time to let the land lay fallow in order to restore and recover, and then start the cycle again? So you had your annual cycles, you had your monthly cycles, and even a weekday cycle. Cycles is an important and essential part of life. And so is the birth, the concept of the birth and the death and the rebirth. That is pretty much a part of life that we are exploring as souls in this reality. Now, there's something very important that I thought we needed to understand here, is that when we begin to explore life in this way, we need to understand that we are 95% subconscious. A little picture here for you to understand. This is the subconscious part of who we are, the big part of who we are. This is the part that drives your reality. This is your conscious mind. This is your waking mind. This is your ego. This is your important part, aspect of you, but this part think it's the one that rules behind the scenes. It's not. It's this part that rules your life behind the scenes. And we need to understand this part, learn to work with this part, access this part in some way, reprogram this part, because very often there's negative programming and the self-harming habits that we're talking about, addictions, that we need to erase, eradicate, remove from this part in order for this part to be healthy in the way it observes reality. This part is not in charge, although he thinks he is. And once this part realizes he's part of the bigger, this part here, then the whole, as it were, becomes unified. It's about making the subconscious conscious. And when you make the subconscious conscious, the equilibrium is set. You will have a connection, because this part here is the part that is the portal to the divine, the portal to God. When you silence this part through meditation, there's a technique that you do where you silence the mind. You can hear what this part is telling you. That is a secret to life. Good luck with that. That's not easy. It takes work. Thank you.
Cool. So we're on to the next question. Again, I'm just going to repeat the format. Well, I'm going to talk for 3 minutes. Len's going to talk for 3 minutes on this question. And hopefully in between, you're going to think about something you might agree or disagree with on this particular question. And we're going to have a second go at answering the same question for another 3 minutes each. Anyway, so here's a quote from Eckhart Tolle. He's a famous spiritual leader at the moment, modern, secular, I would say, often described as a spiritual leader. And so anyway, the primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but your thoughts about it. And I do agree with that a lot. I just feel that from my experience, Eckhart Tolle focuses too much on this idea of that as long as you live in the now, you'll be fine. But I think you need a lot more tools, very practical tools, to feel that your situation is good. So it is true that you can have all the money in the world and still be miserable. So you need to, have this thing fixed so that you can experience the world in a better way. And so here's one tool that you can use. And this is from a teaching of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He says, look at those below you as in people who've got less than you, and do not look at those above you, for it is the best way not to belittle the favors of God. Okay, so what it's saying is, like, you have a lot of things, and when you're being miserable, you're really disrespecting, you're belittling these amazing things you have. So, for example, you might not think air is an amazing thing, but what happens if air was taken away from you? You would be like, oh my gosh, please give me another breath of air. It's amazing. We get so much of it that we belittle it. We take it for granted. So how do you reset your mindset? What tool can you have? This piece of advice is saying, look at those people with less than you. It's a really quick way of, going, oh my gosh, look, they've got so little and I've got this thing that they don't have, and suddenly you start appreciating it. But if you do the reverse, if you start doing what a lot of people do nowadays, they look at, social media, they watch a TV and they go, that person's a billionaire or something. I wish I was a billionaire. I'm so poor compared to that billionaire. Then you start making your life a misery. And actually, that's the default. That's why this very simple sounding advice is so important. You might think it's obvious, but we don't do it. Most of us are making our lives really miserable. Yeah. So I agree. You have to, fix this so that you can appreciate all the good things, and you need a lot of tools to do that.
Cool. I'm going to address something that I've always had a problem with in terms of dealing with people, especially people that are, I'm going to use the word entitled, because we had that same problem that Khalid has just described here with my partner's son when he was about 10 years old, and he complained, why is it that you have everything and I have nothing? And I'm really unhappy about that. It's your job to make me happy. And we listened to those words, and the first thing that came to mind, it's not your dad's job or your mom's job or anybody else's job to make you happy. It's your job to make you happy. And that you can only go within to find the answer to that unhappiness and find out what it is that you are trying to fulfill. We recognize there was an emotional need that he's trying to fulfill with things, and things don't make you happy. So we got to the point where every weekend he was buying and given a new toy, and then he would play with the toy for 3 minutes, get bored with it, and it gets chucked in a pile. We had piles of old toys collecting dust that were just sitting there that we eventually had to get rid of in some way or another. But what really happened was this boy had an emotional need that he tried to fulfill, and things was never going to do it. And it is a very hard lesson for children to learn that things will never give you happiness. And life has a very funny way of teaching children things like that. You'll end up, I'm looking at I use a hypothetical name, little Sibu Seesaw living in Zimbabwe, who has to walk 3 miles every morning before school to a well nearby his little village in the Maluti Mountains in order to go and get the water for the day. And then he carries this canister of water back to his little mud hut in Zimbabwe so that he can then give his mother the water for the day so that she can do the cooking and whatever needs to be done. And then he can go to school. Now, suffering like that is there to teach you the lesson of not taking things for granted. And if you are unhappy, then look at little Sibu Seesaw and let that life give you the example. Take away the things that you think is going to make you happy, and then let's hear you complain. You have to find things within you to make you happy. And if you want to begin, list these things in your life that you are grateful for. Develop that attitude of gratitude I've been speaking about. Then you will find that happiness dissipates. You will become a happy person. You'll become a happier person within yourself, and you'll become a person that people want to be around. They want to hang out with you because you generate an energy of happiness that they are looking for, and they enjoy being with you and hanging out with you when you are that way.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so getting back to, this is a quote from Eckhart Tolle. He's a modern spiritualist, and there's 2 elements that I feel are missing from these modern teachings, and they're literally often escaping from. Okay, and that is, first of all, God. They don't want God to be part of the equations. This is one of the reasons why Buddhism is so popular, because it's kind of like, oh, you don't have to believe in God, even though there are parts of Buddhism that definitely do believe in God. So it depends on which kind of brand you're taking on. Usually the Western brand of Buddhism is the no God version. But anyway, but I think having a belief in God is absolutely crucial to your happiness. Because when you don't realize there is a God who's taking care of you, and it's completely reasonable to think that there's a God that's taking care of you. Look at like how your water's being recycled. As if God was to stop this amazing system that's maintaining our very pathetically weak lives, we would be dead just like that. If we were, a little bit closer to the sun, if we weren't doing an almost perfect circle around the sun, we would be dead. There's a million and one things that are maintaining our lives. So when we realize, not even believe, it's just realize that God is there keeping us alive, then and it's a living God that you can talk to, who helps me all the time, then it gives you a lot of comfort that it's not all dependent on you. When something goes wrong, it doesn't just mean that's all finished. There's a God that will help you and constantly helping you. That's one very important thing. And the other thing about modern spirituality, the godless type, it's always the kind of thing that's become popular in the West is what I would call very individualistic, self-centered spirituality. What I mean by that is it's always about taking care of yourself. And that does not make you happy. I find a lot of people who follow that kind of spirituality are constantly unhappy, and it doesn't really help them much. It helps them a little bit in that they're reflecting a little bit on their lives, and they're making less excuses, taking responsibility a little bit. But I think it's very important to do things for other people. Now, there have been scientific experiments. I always talk about only a few things over and over on this show. Like there's a TED talk that says how you can buy happiness, how money can buy happiness. Well, the answer in short is you spend it on other people. Okay. So there's a teaching in Islam that paradise is the abode of the generous. Okay. Paradise in this life and the next. That's, by the way. So if you want happiness, give to other people, and you'll just find that. Why is that? Why does that make sense? Giving to other people makes you happy. You start making connections with other people. When you're selfish, you go into your little corner and you start losing connection with people all around you, even if you're surrounded by people and you're not happy. So I think you need some of these kind of tools to be happy.
An interesting thing that we find when we have our sessions with our clients, and our clients have a list of questions that they prepare that we can ask the subconscious. One of the questions that they ask a lot is, what is my purpose? What was I born to come and do in this life? And 99% of them, if not 100% of them, 99.9% of them all come with the same response. They are here to help people. We are here to help each other. Now, when I first started out on my spiritual path, something in me was driven to want to help people. But did I have the right tools to help people? Did I have the right way to help people? I had to go on a journey of discovery to find the right mechanisms, the right tools in order to do so. But yes, people are here to help one another. It's part of our soul purpose. We are all souls. We are all on this journey, on this planet. We are all here to help each other. And anything or anyone that takes that away from you is not helping you in the right direction. So it's an important part of our journey we need to understand. Spirituality, I think the only brand of spirituality that I am connected with, that I'm working with, is understanding that we are all fragments of God, the all that is, Allah, and we are all here having a temporary human experience to explore this third density, this third dimension. It's part of an evolutionary path. And it's important for us to explore all facets of this, whether it's the facet of suffering, the facet of joy, the aspects of pleasant and not so pleasant, in order to better understand the balances and what is it we are trying to achieve as part of our evolutionary path. If we grow, we develop, we ascend out of, rise above difficulties, trials and tribulations and problems, then it helps someone else. It took me a while to arrive at a place in my journey where I was able to have a tool set that I was able to give people to help them on their path and their journeys, to be able to help them with whatever difficulties they are facing. Now, yes, an important aspect of this is you cannot pour from an empty vessel. We need to make sure that we are rested, we are refreshed, we take time out for ourselves daily to re-energize, get ourselves aligned with Source, with God, with Spirit, in order to be able to then go out. This relationship is balanced with this relationship there. So that's important, but that needs to be in place before this can be in place. Do you make sense of that? Does that make sense? This is where I believe spirituality is taking us to understand that the divine relationship on this level is the balance, the reason for this relationship to happen.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so let's see. Awesome. Do we need religion to be good? Okay, so I'm going to desperately try hard to squeeze in my friend's answer into the question somehow, just because he's such a regular, and maybe he didn't really realize that I've changed the format for the millionth time of the questions. Okay. So normally, if you're new to the show, that you can ask anything you want. So my friend Anwar says, "Do you think that World War I could have been?" Oh, so I should read the question first. So the main question up there, is, "Do we need religion to be good?" Okay, and as a sub kind of answer, I'm going to try to squeeze in this thing about if in World War I, the politicians were more tolerant of each other, different religious beliefs, would we have avoided World War I? And the way I'm going to put it is back to the question: do we need religion to be good? Religion constantly makes you remember that you are brothers and sisters. You are children of this one God. So that would naturally make you tolerant to each other. Let me just explain that in a kind of real world scenario. So in the Middle East, the birthplace of many of the big religions, the Abrahamic faiths, people who are Jewish or Muslim, despite what you might see in the news, some of it's, a lot of it's true, but a lot of the time you don't see how closely connected all these different faiths are, because they know their original teachings are the same, right? And so, and they talk to each other knowing that they are all children of God. They say things like children of Adam, like that's the way you talk to each other. Like when you say people, another way of saying that in Arabic is Bani Adam. That means children of Adam. Like we're part of this big family. So just that way of thinking really connects people and makes them less aggressive to each other. And so tying it back into, do we need religion to be good? Like we don't naturally think of the things like that. We're like in London, we're surrounded by people, but people don't think like they're all brothers and sisters. That sounds like some biggie hippie idea for them, right? And then there's all these other tools, I call them, in religion that we don't do, like smile. This is a quote from Prophet Muhammad. I quote, just throw one in the few seconds I've got left. Smiling in your brother's face is an act of charity. Okay, I'm going to talk about the psychology of that in the next 30 seconds. But do people smile at each other normally in London? No, that'd be really weird. People actually get scared in London if you smile at them, right? Unless they're nice people already. And so if people did that, people would just be so much better. And so, yes, you do need religion to be good, really.
My view on this might be different to yours, because I don't necessarily believe religion helps you to be good. We are all souls. Understand that we are all inherently good. Anything negative, hatred to begin to anger, these are all learned behaviors, learned attitudes. We can unlearn those things as good as we can learn them. We are born to love. Love is the default that we are born with. And we are born without religion. Religion is taught. What we can learn to do is make sure that we don't get trapped by the negativity, the toxic reality we live in. And unfortunately, that's very, very difficult. We come into a very toxic reality when we choose to come into the earth plane. But as souls, we are born into this world by default with love. And love has to be the way forward, the way out. Any other behavior that is learned is that, and I'm quoting Nelson Mandela, says, if we can learn to hate, we can also unlearn that and learn to live with one another in love. And that is pretty much what Nelson Mandela said. And I fully believe that any negativity, any negative attitude, any attitude that holds what we call a negative vibration, negative like anger, hatred, impatience, things like that, intolerance. Those are what we refer to as low vibrational attitudes. It does not help you in your spiritual path to harbor these things. We need to address them and release them and let them go and focus on the love. And if it means you need to go to a place where you can isolate yourself, take yourself separate, what we call a sabbatical, go find yourself. Has anybody seen the movie Eat, Pray, Love? That pretty much is a typical example. Love that movie because it gives you that example when you're working in a toxic environment that you don't belong in anymore, and at some point your soul just gets totally sick and tired of that place. Take yourself out of it and go and find yourself. Go and do your Eat, Pray, and Love journey and find that love at the end of it. So that's pretty much where I come from. We are born to be good. We lost it somewhere on the way, and we can get back again. That's my view on this one.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, somebody agreeing with you says you can never go wrong with love, from Alika, and I agree as well. There's my thumbs up. we're very iconified, isn't it? Sorry, I shouldn't be joking about that. Anyway, so but Alika's an old friend from another show that I do. And she's joined. Thank you so much. Just so you know, Alika, what we're trying to do, the format is, we used to be asking any question you want, but now I'm trying to do really practical topics. But because you've made the effort to come on the show, and I really appreciate that. So we're talking about, do we need religion at the moment? And there's more questions in the description below, right? And this would be the normal thing, but I'm going to try to squeeze in your question into this topic. So, do we need religion to be good? And Alika, I will just put it on the screen. It's going to be very technical. Okay, this thing about jinn. Okay, it's she's saying it's an idea. You've heard of that? Wow. Okay. So, the understanding of jinn that I have is very different to a lot of people. So, it's funny that you said jinn. You mentioned Eat, Pray, Love, because the writer of that did an amazing TED talk. What's her name? Elizabeth Gilbert, right? Yes, that's right. Okay. And she talked about this idea that jinn actually comes from. She didn't mention jinn, she mentioned genius. Okay, and genius used to be a kind of ghost that was in people's walls that inspired them to do amazing things. It wasn't people that are genius. So the idea that she was trying to get across is that it doesn't all depend on you. You're often inspired to do great things. But anyway, the point is, Alika mentions jinn. How does that help you at all? What's it got to do with, do we need religion to be good? I'm going to tell you that jinn in the Quran are not ghosts. Okay, this is a big misunderstanding. Okay, there's a lot of explanations about what jinn are. For example, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, met some jinn, and they were actually known as people historically that he met that were not ghosts. So there's a lot of proof that they're not ghosts, but it's often misunderstood because jinn often means the unseen. Okay, it could be kind of Illuminati type people, because jinn generally talks about leaders or creative leaders, or just generally people who control the masses. Okay, so often there are unseen, like, the Illuminati. Okay, so but I myself consider myself a jinn, not necessarily in the controlling type, but kind of like a creative type. Okay, the jinn are described as people who are kind of fiery of temperament. I don't look like it, but yeah, if you know me personally, you will know that, right? A lot of creative types are like that. And the point is, why do I talk about it? Is because if you understand people, if the Quran or God talks about the different kind of characteristics of people and how they fit together, because they're not bad, leaders are not bad inherently, then they know how to work together. So it helps us to be good. Sometimes there's so much frustration because we don't understand each other, we don't know how to relate to each other. And having that insight that the creator, the person who's made our blueprints, who knows us best, if you take that insight, then it helps us become good to each other more easily.
Right. I'm going to delve into, the word I used earlier, metaphysical. I'm going to throw my knowledge of the metaphysical spirituality and metaphysical science into that, because there's an aspect of our Kabbalistic training when I studied the esoteric Kabbalah, which is Solomonic to a degree, Solomon, which delved deeply into the Kabbalistic metaphysical aspects of spirituality. And there are non-physical entities on the planet we live in, which we refer to as elementals. And they are referred to and divided in these 4 groups: fire elementals, earth elementals, water elementals, and air elementals. And they are all part and parcel of nature spirits, nature non-physical entities. Non-physical in the sense of you cannot perceive them with your physical eyes. They are outside of the spectrum, the physical spectrum that you can, the electromagnetic spectrum that you can visually see. You have to perceive them through your third eye, or what they call your spiritual eye, in order to be able to understand them. But if you are a Sagittarius, a Leo, or an Aries, you are probably prone to working closely with fire elementals. If you are a Gemini, a Libra, and which is the other, an Aquarius, you are probably prone to working with the air elementals, which is known as fairies. If you are a Pisces, a Scorpio, and a Cancerian, you are probably prone to working with water elementals. And then the earth elementals, gnomes, dwarfs, gnomes, things like that, they are known in the realm. And now that would be Taurus, that would be a Capricorn, and that would be, which is a Virgo. Those are the 3 signs that tend to be. You'll find people that work with these elementals tend to be nature lovers. You people that like gardening, love gardening, toiling the ground, especially people like Virgos and Taurians and Virgo, Taurus, and Capricorn. They tend to like garden work. So they have an affinity for it. They have an understanding of working with the ground. Farmers generally love doing things like that, and animals even to a degree as well. So these are the elementals that people tend to connect with, whether consciously or subconsciously, in order to be able to work with the elementals. Now, the jinn, in my world and understanding, comes from fire elementals. Solomon worked very heavily and very closely with the fire elementals. So there has to be an understanding. There are books available you can study in order to be able to work with that, but you've got to know your subject to do this in order to call up a jinn and work with a jinn, establishing a working relationship with them, so on. But that I'm going to leave for another topic of discussion later.
Ooh. Okay. So I am trying to look at the comments and somehow squeeze them into the nature of the show it's supposed to be. But anyway, let's see what I can do. So this is another comment from Ricky Gervais. I'm not the biggest fan of his, but he's a little bit funny, and that's why I'm kind of using him. And he's very popular with a lot of atheists because he's an atheist comedian. It says, if you can't joke about the most horrendous things in the world, what's the point of jokes? Humor is to get us over terrible things. And I put this thing, I get the feeling that so he's often against religious people, and he thinks religious people are too touchy and we should be able to joke about things. That's one side of it. And I think probably he likes this idea of free speech at any cost, maybe, who knows. So and what I would like to say is that, again, this is a very self-centered way of looking at the world. I think, if you want to deal with the terrible things that people face, you need to be mentally healthy, and you get mentally healthy by following the various spiritual teachings. And those spiritual teachings are all the opposite of being self-centered. It's about, like I said earlier on, paradise is the abode of the generous. If you are generous, you become a happier person. Being generous allows you to make more connections with people, which again is a basic human need. Psychologists will tell you a basic human need is to be connected with people in a meaningful way. So, giving your time to people definitely helps. Another kind of, according to the Quran, our time is described by in some interesting qualities, and that is that time seems to be rushing by all the time, and that those people are feeling particularly lost. And lost could be another way of describing people who are depressed, except for those people who, like I said before, believe in what? Believe that there's a God taking care of them. That certainly helps. But another quality is doing good deeds. Okay, so if you're doing good deeds, like being generous to each other, that makes you feel good within yourself as a human being. You respect yourself. And then spreading the truth, because truth is the wisdom that helps you navigate life easily. And being patient. Patient means staying calm. So you get through the rough ups and downs of life. So I think that's a better solution than telling rude jokes about each other's situations. Yep.
And there's an interesting thing about Ricky Gervais. From a spirituality point of view, it's very helpful to understand that we are supposed to have fun. This life is not all to be serious. And earth signs can be some of the most serious signs on the planet. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorns. Very often they forget how to have fun, how to take a little time out of their day and do something they enjoy doing, a little fun thing, whether it's going to draw a picture, draw a painting, call a relative on the phone and just have a nice chat and talk about good old days or whatever the case may be. It's important to do something you enjoy doing and have a fun time, a fun experience at least once a day. I do know that the whole point of doing this is to help you, to take you out of that very serious mindset. You know what? It can be hard living in the earth plane. We are aware of the fact that this can be a toxic environment. And what helps us to retain our sanity is very often a little bit of humor, provided it's not at the expense of another. We don't have to make jokes at the expense of someone else. It doesn't have to be that way. But it's good to take care of yourself in that way mentally, to have a good laugh from time to time. I'm all for humor. I'm all for joking. In fact, if you want to have a good laugh, go and hang out with an Aquarius and a Libran and an Aries. Those are the jokers in the zodiac. They really are. And it's good fun to sometimes have a good friend that you can exchange a joke with and have a good laugh. Lovely stuff. I remember in the World Wars, the First and the Second World War, and you'll see it in the movies, when the soldiers knew they were going off to go and fight on a war that they probably won't come home from, what they used to do on the boats and in the places where they were traveling on the trucks, they would sing songs. And this is where songs like "It's a Long Way from Tipperary," if anybody has ever heard that song, "It's a long way from home," that kind of thing. And a couple of them would actually change the words slightly with a tongue-in-cheek twist in the humor, so just so they can have a laugh. "It's the wrong way to tickle Mary. It's the wrong way for home," and that kind of thing, So yes, you can go and have a laugh, and that's one of the best form. There's a verse in the Bible that says that laughter is as medicine for the soul. Very nice, very good. It's helps us to find a happy place within. Have a good laugh. Make sure you have something in your life that you can go to have a moment of fun and do something. If it's a friend that you can crack a joke with, by all means, we're all for it.
Cool. So I like to balance my first answer because I didn't really talk about, having a sense of humor. You might get the impression that I don't believe in having a sense of humor, and that's not right at all. I think we should have a laugh, and when we're more connected as brothers and sisters, we can have a more free sense of humor. Let me explain this idea. So when I lived in the Middle East, as I said, people, Christians and Muslims, whoever they were, treated each other as brother and sister. They literally said, I'm your brother, I'm your sister. That's how they talked. Even in the workplace, that was the normal way of communicating or seeing each other. And so they were talking about, I'm trying to squeeze in an example of cheeky kind of jokes. I'm a teacher, I'm working in a school, and I was shocked the kind of jokes they would tell about each other. So there's a professional kind of forum where they're learning how to use these interactive electronic whiteboards, and there's a teacher, a lady who's really short, and they just jokingly said, oh, you need a stepladder to get to the top. And I was like, I was new to the country, and I was like, wow, that seems really rude. But everybody's laughing, and everybody's laughing together. And that teacher, lovely math teacher, she's the one who would say to me, like, I'm your sister, anything you need. So there's complete kind of an understanding that you don't take things badly. Even when they argue, they're kind of very abrupt with each other, and because they know they're kind of just brothers and sisters, argue, but they don't take it really badly. They don't remember a bad comment for the rest of their lives and don't talk to each other, which is often what you get here in the West. People just stop talking to each other because of one conversation. So I do agree with a bit of humor, but I don't think that's the source. I think being kind to each other, being helpful to each other, treating each other like brothers and sisters, being generous, having this understanding of our place in the world. And I quickly want to say, Alika, I know your comment about Persian mythology. When Len goes, and I don't know, have you seen that comment, Persian mythology?
I've seen it, yes, it's there.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about it?
I'm not familiar with Persian mythology.
I'm not familiar. So I'll spend a few seconds at the end when I've done the thanks. And if you want to, Alika, I will talk about it, just so you know. So, but anyway, going back to what I'm saying, humor is just one tiny tool, and it's good to joke with each other. And you can do that when you're more connected already. But they're not really the tool to get over problems. I think if my mother died and you made a joke about my mother, I don't think that would actually help. No. It's not, and that's the thing with a lot of these kind of atheistic philosophies. They're not very practical. They don't have they poke fun at religious teachings, but they don't have better solutions.
I'm not going to go any further. I'm looking at the time.
Cool. So that was okay. Is it? Oh wow! Oh my gosh! Yeah. That's how it was supposed to be. Okay, here's the vote of thanks. Thank you very much, Len. I say that every single time, but he's so like, I change the format all the time. He says, "Yeah, sure, whatever you want." So like, that's so awesome. So can't thank you enough. You make the show much easier for me than just me doing it by myself. It's really hard talking for 1 hour by yourself. No gaps. And just thank you for everybody taking part. Thank you, Alika. Thank you, Anwar. I'm sorry I couldn't answer your question properly, maybe. But yeah, we're trying to go to a new format. And thank you, everybody who's just watching live or not live. And catch you next week. I'm going to spend a few seconds. Len, you can go if you want.
I can go. I'll be
yeah.
Bye, everybody. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Cool. But I'm just going to hang on. Bye, Lynn. I'm just going to hang on for a few seconds. So I'll post this thing. What was this? Persian mythology. So first of all, I don't really know too much about it, but I'll give you I think there's a general misunderstanding about what the Quran is. The Quran is a guide for life. It's not a book of mythologies. And so there are truths that have been told throughout time. So the jinn, the idea of the jinn might have been one of them. I'm not really an expert. I think even now the idea of what jinn are is misunderstood, and it could have been misunderstood at the time of the Persians as well. And maybe the other, things you mentioned, they could have turned into myths over hundreds or even thousands of years. And so what the Quran is the pure teachings without the myth, without the interference of man or people, as it were, in these scriptures. So what happens to scriptures over time? God allows them to be corrupted when they are done with. So you have that with the Bible. It's famously corrupted, got lots of things or lots of mistakes in it. Things that are exactly the opposite of what science teaches. And how is it possible that God doesn't know how the universe was made, for example, but the Bible teaches the complete opposite of how the universe was made, for example. So you have these problems in older scriptures. So the Quran doesn't copy all these things. The Quran is actually 100% in line, amazingly in line with the teaching, with scientific knowledge. Like the other day, I thought the earth was sphere, but I read in the Quran the earth was an egg shaped. It's not an ordinary egg, but the shape of an ostrich egg, an Arabian ostrich egg. And you'll find that actually when the earth spins, it gets pushed out near the sort of the hemisphere, right? So it does become like an egg shape. So it's amazing how in line the Quran is. But a lot of these other teachings, maybe there's these Persian teachings that you're talking about, they might be kind of, outdated. Might have been corrupted, interfered with by human beings, and that's why they're not much good anymore. Let's just see one more comment, then I'll go. So what does it say? Aren't you afraid the Quran is retelling myths of other mythologies? So exactly the opposite of what I just said. The Quran only teaches the things that are useful to know. So those myths could be literally myths, i.e. like made up things, that stories that human beings made up and they added to these different scriptures. And the Quran does not include those things. So you'll see that there are things that the Quran agrees with in the Bible and things like that. And then it disagrees when it's not in line with science. And it's amazing that the Quran disagreed at a time when we didn't know that it was not in line with science, that we didn't know the universe was not created in 6 days, for example, and things like that. So yeah, so you said you can give sources where the Quran is copied from. There are things that are similar in the Quran, but it's amazing that it's not just a copy. Well, it's not just a copy at all, but there are a few things, and it was even prophesied that it would be, the parts of the Quran were prophesied from the Bible, like the 7 verses of the opening chapter of the Quran and things like this, right? There are lots of things. So it shouldn't be a surprise that God is this one God who's been teaching all of humanity roughly the same thing. So it shouldn't be a surprise that there are similarities. But to say it's just a copy is a misunderstanding, because if you understand that the Quran differs in important things where the other scriptures were wrong, then that kind of disproves this idea that it's just a copy of some older scripture. Okay, I did say I'm going to go, and but I'll look at your comments later on and have a look at them and see what I can do, because my family are waiting downstairs. I shouldn't go over the top and disrupt the balance of, offering time for this show and offering time for my family. So anyway, thank you so much, Alika. I'll check out your comments. Thank you for taking part, and peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. Cool.